welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'll be your astrologer today. Happy Tuesday, everybody. I hope you guys are doing well and your week is off to a great start. Today we're going to be discussing Mercury transiting through the sign of Aquarius. We're going to take a look at what's going on with Mercury's trek, and we're going to touch on some of the themes of this particular transit. If you guys are new to my channel, welcome. I'm an evolutionary astrologer. I work both with Western astrology as well as tarot to have a better understanding of what's going on in the cosmos. If you guys like my content and you want to see more of it, make sure you click the bell button below so you are subscribed and you know when we have new content coming out on the channel. I'm titling this video Stranger Than Fiction. And like I said, this is going to be on Mercury's transit through the sign of Aquarius. So this will be taking place from February 4th through February 23rd, 2024. Now, I'm sure maybe you guys have heard the phrase, the truth is sometimes stranger than fiction. Well, that's how I'm kind of seeing this transit. We're going to kind of break it down and talk about why some of the things coming out over the next month might seem a little crazy. But the truth is that somewhere, there may be some truth somewhere in between some of the stories that are breaking. I really connect this to, that phrase where real life events or situations can be unusual, bizarre, or surprising, more so than anything we could have ever imagined or created in fiction. So this week, and really the next couple of weeks, we're looking at reality and questioning whether or not some of these things are really so extraordinary. And if there's any potential truth in the midst of some of the events that will be breaking with Mercury's transit. It'll be highlighting the idea that some true stories or occurrences can be so unusual that they seem more fantasy than anything else. And yeah, we're gonna see how that's gonna be playing out in the world and also in our life. Obviously, if you are ruled by Mercury, so if you are a Gemini or Virgo rising, Mercury changing signs is very important for you, as well as my Aquarius sun, moon, rising placements, because Mercury will be transiting through your sign. Now, for me, just thinking about this in general, I'm going to give you guys lots of words, obviously, in this video, because that's what Mercury is all about. Some keywords that you want to be listening for and how you may see them out in the world. But when I think of just general kind of themes of this particular transit, I think a lot about political chatter, okay? I think a lot about going in depth because the actual transit kicks off with a conjunction to Pluto, where we are diving deep and looking into the details of things that are going on in politics, in Congress, in Senate, in potential legislation, in bills, and trying to kind of uncover something. So that's really how the transit's going to begin. So expect lots of chatter when it comes to politics because that is the association with Aquarius. But also some very interesting information pertaining to environmental sciences, data and information in science. That's also kind of like a combination of Mercury and Aquarius. Obviously, Aquarius is a fixed air sign, so we're going to be hearing a lot of like really significant information that people are going to be claiming is truth, is fact. We're going to hear more about social movements and causes because that's what Aquarius rules over. Technology, systems, especially AI. I think we're going to hear more about some of this over the next few weeks. When I think of Aquarius, I think of like panels. I think of groups of people sitting down, discussing something, some really powerful group dynamics and powerful conversations can be had. And also like think tanks, because I think about groups of people in Mercury and Aquarius and that conjunction of Pluto, of trying to kind of assess, what do we think people are thinking? What is the general overall consensus? So watch for that as well. But Mercury can also be seen as writers, politicians, groups, higher minds, ideas. So I think about people who are broadcasting on the internet, people who are streaming, people who are writing columns and pieces. And so this can be some really juicy information that's been kind of building, especially over the last 48 hours. Now, you guys are watching this on the 6th, if you're watching it the day that it comes out, and this conjunction between Pluto and the ingress into Aquarius actually started on the 4th. So we're kind of getting a little bit of a late start on it. But I did touch on this in my astro weather this week. So if you guys caught my Sunday video, I talk about the Pluto conjunction with Mercury through all of the 12 rising signs. I also cover this in my monthly horoscope. So if you want to know exactly how that's affecting you, check out my February horoscopes. I will have the scoop for you there. Now, when I think of Aquarius in particular, okay, so here's the laundry list of like keywords, catchphrases, stuff that you guys are going to be hearing through this transit. Aquarius is much more than just your stereotypical, it's networks, it's friends, it's groups. Yes, it can be those people. But Aquarius has a connection to things like airports and airmen, okay, which I think is especially interesting if we look at the connection to Saturn. I'll kind of put a pin in that, come back to it. Broadcasters, legislation, friends, modernization, organization, physics, radar, research, revolutions, Senate, science, and wishes. So these are real big kind of catchphrases in the sign of Aquarius. Now, to really make astrology make sense, you have to look at your chart and you have to see which house is Mercury transiting through. So that particular house is the area of your life. So for example, you know, if you were a Scorpio rising, right, this transit of Mercury is going through your 4th house. So the communication, action, that kind of stuff is happening at home. So you have to know which house this is taking place in, but it's expressing itself through the energy of Aquarius. So in more modern sense, we're also going to be talking about, you know, the future, because Aquarius has that association with Uranus. And then when we look at Mercury, it's what we're talking about. So we're going to be seeing that there's opportunities for updates of technology, updates in terms of what's going on the internet. We're going to be hearing about the future also of tech. I do think that this particular transit is an interesting one, not just because of the, you know, the aspects that we're going to see to Uranus, but also with Saturn being one of the dispositors as well. It's a lot of things that people intuitively, I feel like, are like they already know, or they're starting to come together and talk about feelings and hunches, or they're having meetings and they're discussing like this kind of feeling that like something is coming, and that's connected to Saturn being in Pisces. Now, Mercury, on the other hand, has more associations generally we see with Gemini and Virgo, right? These are the communication signs. You know, Mercury can rule over everything from health to data to information to writing, text messages, emails, phone calls, travel, commerce, business, because it does represent kind of this exchange idea. So Mercury going through Aquarius in my mind is a very strong placement. I consider it to almost be equivalent to Mercury in Virgo, if not maybe even a little bit stronger personally, because it's very abstract, it's in the air, and it represents kind of going and touching on these higher kind of forms of knowledge, and also where information can come to us through that connection that we have maybe with our higher self, maybe with a higher kind of collective idea that everybody's kind of tapping into, and then we all start kind of having these realizations and these downloads. Mercury has connections to agents, okay? So agents of all kinds, ambassadors, bank tellers, columnists, contracts, critics. Mercury rules over definitions and dictionaries. So I'm interested to see like where words are being, you know, tweaked and changed in the next couple of weeks, especially like in bills and legislation, and when we're really reading the rule of law and like what things mean or what the intentions truly are. It also rules gossip, handwriting, intellect, language, lectures, listening, meddling, news, opinions, press, reports, travel, trade, and anything that's wireless. So we're going to be hearing a lot more about some of this stuff. I find it fascinating that Mercury first meets up with Pluto, and so it can kind of represent these damning ideas or words or these things that are coming out in the world that may seem conspiracy-esque or kind of crazy. But we know, like I said, truth can sometimes be stranger than fiction, and we're going to have to see what Mercury is kind of trying to tell us throughout this transit, because he will be hanging out with, eventually towards the end of the transit, a whole stellium of planets in Aquarius. So some of the things that Mercury is giving us a warning about or giving us a heads up about may not be that crazy after all. Now, when I think of Aquarius in general, you know, individuality, you know, is a huge theme with this particular sign. They want to be unique and independent. They want to be independent individuals, but a part of a team. So I think that that's going to be a huge theme of how we can kind of connect with other people, how we can sit down, have meetings, how we can think about new systems and ways to be able to merge and work together towards a common goal, a collective goal. So it's a really powerful time for being able to kind of network and maybe like freshen up like a LinkedIn profile or to join a new social media network. And also be really focusing on our goals and our wishes, because that's also associated with Aquarius. Now, this is a sign that is very intellectual. So it's an air sign. It's also a fixed air sign. So it's connected to intellectual pursuits, rational thinking, love for knowledge. So I definitely think that this is going to be a really significant time for people who are really wanting to do some research, get some new information, kind of think outside of the box. That's a huge theme that comes up with Mercury and Aquarius. And I do feel like this is good for being more analytical, more objective, and having a keen interest in social and humanitarian issues. Now, humanitarianism comes up with Aquarius. We see that because that sign rules, how we all kind of come together collectively. And that drive and desire to contribute to the greater good of society, right? I know some of you guys get triggered when you hear that phrase. But it's also about being involved in charitable or community activities and what we are contributing to society. So what you're going to hear a lot of, and I've heard a lot of this the last 48 hours with just Mercury's ingress and the conjunction to Pluto, is we're starting to see all these people kind of talking about, okay, what are we doing? Not what am I doing? What are we doing? How are we kind of encouraging other people to ask those hard questions and really kind of discuss and talk about the elephant in the room, deal with the crisis, right? Pluto, Mercury, and then start talking about what we're going to do about it. So it's really great for like opening up dialogue and debates and exchange and like asking people, their opinion and being able to, kind of throw your hat into the ring, so to say. I think that this is definitely about friendship. It's especially the last 24 hours for me. It's been a lot about friendship. I've had a lot of conversations with friends about stuff that they're going through. It's a lot of changes that they're going through. It's a lot of crisis that they're dealing with. But I think that it can also be about keeping an open mind when it comes to who we associate with, who our friends are. It can be about accepting diverse perspectives, making good friends and being a team player. Recently saw something I reposted on my ex. It was about somebody who was like, I woke up, and I realized that I was in a cult, and I kind of like recognized and realized that I thought that I was really awake, but I'm realizing that what I've been aligning myself with really isn't truth, and it really isn't kind of like facts, right? And realizing that they became so associated with like identity politics that they're taking a step back and their eyes are kind of opening up and they're trying to talk to other people about it, and they're having a difficult time socializing and relating with people who may criticize them for, questioning some of the narratives out in the world. Perfect example, I think, of this particular Mercury-Pluto conjunction. Pluto can represent that crisis point. So we've seen the sun conjunct Pluto, where individuals have been waking up and changing rapidly over the last few weeks since Pluto and the sun ingressed into Aquarius. And here's where now we start to find the words. We start to put them into tweets. We start to put them onto blogs. We're having these, in-depth conversations about where we're changing our mind. There's something that's shifting, and we're starting to kind of keep an open mind. It can bring the opportunity to connect with our tribe, though. So if you're feeling like a little bit of an outsider, a lot of people are feeling like that right now with the North Node in Chiron and Aries. They're afraid to speak out. They're feeling very isolated, or they're feeling alone, or that they're going to be judged. But this is some really powerful transits that's taking place this month, where I think that one person's insight or one person's intuition or their feelings or their thoughts, you could be that one person in a sea of 1,000 people, but that sharing of that idea can literally plant a seed, or it can spark what can eventually be like a movement. So I'm watching for like catchphrases that people are going to be coming up with. I'm really keeping an eye on things that people are starting to repost and that they're starting to share, because Mercury in the sign is about kind of collective thoughts and how we're kind of putting it out there and seeing how people respond to it, and if other people are also starting to think some of the same things. Certainly Mercury-Pluto has like this energy of being able to kind of like read other people's minds. So we might find that somebody says something that we really resonate with over the next few weeks, and we find that we are, starting to kind of share that idea or that concept or that catchphrase with other people. So it's a really important time to be sharing your thoughts with other people, not isolating yourself and being afraid of sharing what's on your mind. Now, Aquarius is a sign that's known, because of its association both with Saturn, which can be a little cold, it can be a little standoffish. Detached, right, is another word that kind of comes up, I think, for Aquarius, and emotionally detached, or somebody who wants to focus, more on facts and numbers and data and science rather than the emotional side of things. So sometimes, Aquarius placements can be perceived as being aloof, but I think that this is really about prioritizing logic over emotions and, a preference for wanting to analyze situations objectively. I'm loving that this is going to happen with Mars and Venus. I'm loving that it's going to square Jupiter and Uranus, where people are starting to say, let's not make it be about money. Let's have the conversations, with putting money aside or financial interest aside. What's the right thing to do, or what should we be all doing? You're going to see a lot of crowdfunding movements, I think, from this particular transit, because we're going to see so many squares and aspects both with Jupiter and Uranus. And, Mercury and the Sun have been in superior position. So as all these planets move through Aquarius over the next few weeks, as it squares with Jupiter and Uranus, we're really saying, like, okay, what kind of an impact does this information, does this coming together, these new groups, these new systems, these new panels have on all of our finances, our resources, our food, our banking? I've used this example a million times, but I'm going to keep using it. Look at all of the movements that have been going on with the protests. I mean, you see all of these people coming together in large groups outside of, like political spaces and, places where, basically they're protesting. Is it always peaceful? Well, it depends. Do you like manure, in your city streets? But in all fairness, this is happening because a large group of people can come together made up of a ton of individuals that have the same beliefs and the same ideas, and they can unify and they can become one, right? And so this is where we're seeing these really powerful movements that are taking place that's having a massive impact on tourist-related things. There's a reason why people aren't getting their food, because people are coming together and they're protesting. There's a reason why we're seeing major fluctuations and also changes with banking, because a lot of people are saying, wait a second, do I want to bank with this bank? Also, I think I've heard a lot of people talking the last few days with the conjunctions to Pluto about taxes. This is not a Pluto video, but, I think as personal planets start to kind of cross Pluto, a lot of people are going to be talking about how do we stop the train that is this perpetual state of war that at least we find ourselves here in the United States, and which wreaking havoc on our financial system. We're seeing tons of debt. We're also seeing that all of this money is just going towards funding other countries, endless wars, and in the end, we are the ones who are kind of left holding the bag and not getting the necessary resources that we need. So I've heard a lot of people, instructing and talking about taxes and discussing taxes, and, a lot of people who are, calling for whether or not people should or should not pay their taxes. I'm not a tax specialist. I can't tell you what to do. But it's interesting to hear that chatter, because there's a lot of people realizing, like, wait a second, we're kind of like feeding the beast, So I think we're going to hear more about that as well. What I love is that Mercury in Aquarius is very innovative, very forward thinking. It's great for progressive ideas, new technology, futuristic concepts. I keep telling everybody to think about the future, because the future is now. It's not like this far distant thing where, like, yeah, I'll get around to it, in a few years or maybe someday. This transit is really wonderful for being like, no, I'm going to actively take the steps, and I'm going to be kind of making the connections and talking to people about the future. Even more so now, I think that we're at this pivotal moment where, I still believe the future is undecided. The irony of that is like crazy, considering like that I divine for a living, right? I'm generally kind of telling people what's going to be happening in the future in any given day, but where my readings are different from other people's, like I really believe that free will exists, and that while we can see what's likely going to be happening, what's in the skies, at the end of the day, we have the ability to create change. And so I think that with this Mercury transit, we're recognizing that we can get there a whole lot faster by uniting. We can get there in new, unconventional ways. We can be working with new people, making new friends, changing our kind of belief systems, and we can actually step into the future much more quickly. This placement's known for being unconventional. It's a very non-conformist attitude, usually rejecting, societal norms and expectations. It's about, carving your own path rather than following traditional or conventional ideas. So like I said, getting out of the box seems to really kind of be the theme here. And keep in mind that because it's in a fixed sign, there is a sense of being particularly rigid. You want to watch for the rigidness of the mind. We want to watch where there can be, a good thing can be determination. It can be persistence and a stable approach to ideas. But I do feel like this is going to be fought by a lot of like the financial systems. You're going to see a lot of people being like, I have an idea. This is what we should be doing with the money. And a lot of people are going to be like, no, or this is where we should be investing. And then there's going to be some resistance because we're going to see some pushback from Jupiter and Uranus. The reality of the situation is this, guys. Aquarius season is like we're kind of coming to the end of the, astrological year. As we kind of move into Pisces season, we're going to kind of start to see things kind of cycle out, and then we're preparing for the spring equinox, at least here in the northern hemisphere. That'll be the true astrological new year. There's no stopping this train, okay? Keep in mind that all of these planets that will be in Aquarius this month, it's the dispositor is Uranus and Taurus, and they got to square Uranus. So it's almost like we have no other option but to really embrace the future, come up with new systems and new ideas, learn how to work together, because we know that some of these Uranus and Taurus things are inevitable. Further banking collapse, food crisis, issues also pertaining to energy, issues also pertaining to how money is being spent. So you're going to start seeing people coming together and talking about, well, what can we do to be able to kind of bring about that change? And then we'll see some of these changes emerge in April, May of 2024. Now, themes for me that just kind of came to mind is about being a free thinker. And I think right now, so much of being a free thinker isn't so much about being free. I think, to some extent, freedom of speech, being free can also kind of be the illusion of freedom, depending on where you live. But being a free thinker in a sense of really sitting down and practicing critical thinking, okay? So if somebody, comes at you with an idea or a belief or, a statement or a comment, and it could potentially be something that can cause a rift, because we may see that. We're going to see lots of difference of opinions this month. It's about really sitting down and trying to kind of understand where are they coming from, and like breaking it down in a very kind of diplomatic but also scientific, between the eyes kind of way. It's like, okay, here are the facts. It's not opinions, it's not emotions. Here's the facts. We're removing opinions and emotions out of it. We want to be dealing with facts, with real data, with real information that we can back up. And that's what Mercury in Aquarius wants. I think a lot of this is going to be coming out about the information pertaining to this quote unquote crisis in regards to environmental concerns, where you're going to be hearing more from scientists, from doctors, from physicians, or people who are involved in physics or chemistry or actual environmental sciences, rather than the people who are wanting to push some of these narratives for financial reasons. So we're going to start to kind of peel back the layers on the onion and see the financial incentives behind some of these movements, where really it's going to be about innovating, I think, food. If they say that we're having this crisis environmentally and the impacts that it's going to be having on our environment, and then therefore taxing or limiting farmers, or having your own gardens, or driving a gasoline powered vehicle, or living outside of a 15-minute city, there is obviously inevitably going to be some kind of purpose or reason behind that. And so I look at Jupiter and Uranus very objectively, and I go, well, what does Jupiter and Uranus want in Taurus? Vertical farming indoors, technology in food, lab-grown meats, synthetic meats, also more sales of physical goods. It's also going to be wanting accumulation of more land, digital money and resources, disrupting financial institutions. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist, like pun intended, to literally look at this and go, oh, of course, if we have these issues, then it's creating a system where people have to, get used to paying higher energy bills, or they are forced for financial reasons into new financial systems, or they're forced to, buy the lab-grown meat. I mean, literally, this is the astrology in real life. So it's really important to really pay attention and kind of connect the dots and see where some of these masses of people are coming together, and they're kind of like raising the alarm about inevitably some of these things coming down the line if we don't hold the line as a group, right? And so that's something to kind of look at. Critical thinking through and through. Really stop and ask yourself, the difficult questions. Try to kind of be more dealing with facts rather than emotions or opinions. And everybody's going to have a wide range of emotions. I'm not saying deny them. And obviously, everybody's entitled to their opinion. But we want to deal with facts. We don't want to be dealing with people who are just trying to persuade us because of financial reasons or, because they're strongly opinionated. Sometimes, with the lower octaves of Aquarius, we can have this tendency to kind of get lost in the crowd. That can definitely happen, especially with Pluto being there now. There's a lot of like, well, here's the minority group in the situation and they're not being heard. So now, we want everyone to be equal. So everybody kind of has to kind of live under these laws or under these beliefs. And I don't think it's a, one size fits all type of situation. The beauty of Aquarius is everybody can kind of work, in unison with each other. Everybody's entitled to have their own freedoms, their own belief systems, their own ideas, follow their own direction, while simultaneously creating that space for other people to do the same thing. We want to be careful with wanting to shut down the rights of some things, but wanting to enforce, other people's rights. I think that's a lot of what's been coming up, especially with recent years with Saturn in Aquarius and now Pluto in Aquarius. And we want equality across the board. And really, when I think about this, because Uranus is the dispositor, we're hearing a lot of freedom when it comes to identity. We're hearing a lot of freedom when it comes to our resources, when it comes to our food, what we're consuming. And also, I do think that this is going to definitely bring about some really juicy conversations in regards to our values and what's most important and kind of getting down back to basics, because that's what Taurus wants us to do. Once again, get outside of the box, okay? We're going to see throughout the transits, I'll take you guys through Mercury's trek. Mercury is going to be facing off with Jupiter, so it's going to make news feel larger than life, especially right around that new moon in Aquarius. We will see Mercury come into a square with Uranus, which can feel like our mind is kind of frazzled and we're short-circuiting. But that can also create electrical issues with internet. We can see all kinds of issues where there's kind of communication breakdown, and it's like some stuff that's coming out that literally like shocks the internet. So we want to be mindful that change is inevitable, any which way you slice it. So I think it's about remaining open and keeping an open mind, especially when it comes to communicating with other people, because some of the things I think that we may have thought were crazy like 3 or 4 years ago, now we're not so much crazy, and I hear my husband saying this a lot. He's always like, well, the truth is somewhere in between. I'm like, yeah, that's true. That is true. And I think something that's been coming up for me a lot is about, especially when it comes to like politics, is I'm really trying to focus on policies over people, right? Not focusing so much on political parties, because really, it's like, in my opinion, it's like a uniparty, but policies over people, meaning I'm not going to align myself with any particular candidate or any particular side. It's more, do I like the policies that they're actually, pushing and promoting and trying to bring about? And also, I'm really watching and seeing, because actions speak louder than words. So I want to see, are people actually talking about doing things and creating change, or they actually, doing that? Are they out there going and talking to the common person and really getting in touch with like what's kind of going south out in the world so they can create change? Something else that comes up for me also is like connecting with like-minded people. I think that that's really important. So much of Aquarius teaches us that we do need friends that we can rely on. We do need connection and community. We do need to feel a part of a group. We do want to feel wanted. Some very sensitive topics right now, obviously, with the North Node Chiron conjunction. So a lot of people are kind of feeling like the odd man out, or they're feeling like the black sheep of the family, or definitely, struggling with the concept and the idea of kind of being alone. But something that's really beautiful that will be happening throughout this transit is that we will see sextiles between the North Node in Chiron and Mercury. So that'll be wonderful as well, because it's going to open the door for us to kind of find like-minded, people, or we're going to find other people who have been through some similar struggles or, challenges. And there's almost this like unification that's going to be happening with people who have been feeling like they've had to kind of work on things on their own. So get out there, join meetup groups if you're on Facebook, if you want to find Facebook groups, if you want to be focusing on getting more involved in your local politics, if you're deciding that you want to join a club or an association. These are wonderful ways to be able to kind of connect with people, because I do feel like we need to get back to that. So much of Jupiter, Uranus, and Taurus is about the opportunity to create change in a very physical way. So it's not just relying on being behind a keyboard. It's also about what we are doing out in the world and who we're connecting with and the message that we're spreading and the ability to learn how to come together physically in person. So a lot of this is in Aquarius right now. So it's very abstract. It's like ideas and stuff we're hearing in the internet. But God forbid there's a situation where we don't have the internet, or there is some kind of, we keep hearing the terms like cyber attack and like grid down situation. Like, whether you believe in that or not, I think about the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and I think about how our lives have become so focused revolving around the internet. So many people work remotely now. There's tons of online businesses. There's lots of entrepreneurs. I'm one of them. But I think about how, if we don't have those systems, how do people connect? How do people, talk to each other? Do we focus more on meeting within our local communities? Are we going to, really focus more on being able to, connect with each other in real life? I think that that's something we have to think about. We live in a day and age where we can get information at the speed of light. Some news breaks and then millions of people can hear about it on the internet, on social media. Most likely much faster and with much more clarity than what we're going to be getting from the news stations. And so I do feel like some of the information that's going to be coming out could be very politically or very financially damning. So it would not surprise me if we start to see some issues revolving around censorship or things that are kind of being, hindered in searches and stuff like that, because they're not going to want news to break. So there's got to be ways for us to be able to communicate and connect with people outside of just feeling like we're just going to jump on the internet or whatever. We have to get used to actually connecting and talking to people in other ways. All right. And keep in mind that Mercury is the megaphone for some of the things that are coming. Now, in future weeks, we're going to see Mars go into Aquarius, Venus go into Aquarius. They're going to meet up with Pluto. So that's a very powerful conjunction right around Valentine's Day, where the North and South Node rulers align with Pluto, and there was this major kind of change and transformation. I was listening to somebody talk about the astrology of this year and just how all of the connections and the correlations basically to what we saw in, the 60s and the 70s. The last time we had the North Node Chiron, conjunction in Aries, we saw, the Vietnam War. We also that year saw, I think, a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and there was like a huge revolution. A lot of people rebelling against that and the idea of war. And we just saw how it had ripple effects, all throughout our culture for many years. And a lot of civil unrest, a lot of like racial issues. And we saw a lot of things that were also coming up with, women's rights. And so, history repeats itself, right? And the difference is that this time around, we have so much more ability to be able to connect with other people and to share this information that when we see things that are happening in the world with these conjunctions, it's important to be speaking out and sharing that. So we may be hearing stuff. We might be able to have the opportunity to forward information and articles and stuff to other people. I think that Mercury, kind of ahead of the curve with Pluto, is letting all of us know, like, hey, this incoming like revolution is kind of like coming. So pay attention to some of these major articles in this news drop that I think that's going to be taking place. That's really going to bring a lot of people together. So much about North Node and Aries is about kind of forging our own path, being independent and being courageous and going our own way. And that South Node in Libra is untangling ourselves from complicated relationships, or learning to let certain people go, or learning to not be so like passive or indecisive. And what's beautiful is that if you're somebody who's had like falling outs, I think, with relationships, with relatives, with friends, with coworkers, whatever, it'll be interesting to see like Mars and Venus come into conjunction where Mercury has already been. And I think that we could see a lot of people who are going to be, coming together and like reconnecting and unifying. And recognizing like, hey, I'm sorry that I stopped being your friend because I didn't like your Facebook posts, or, I'm sorry that I didn't invite you to Christmas because I don't agree with your politics, like that kind of stuff. We may see that people start recognizing that this is not necessarily, being played the way that we thought it was going to be played. I think that, when people talk about war and they talk about World War III, personally, I think we're already in it. I think it's like an information war. I think it is a spiritual war. I think that really there has been seeds that have been planted to create conflict and anger and division to get people isolated, because when people are isolated, they act defensive. And when we don't have unity within the family unit, within our communities, within our relationships, our friends, then we can't rise up, right? So this is an important moment to really ask ourselves, is it worth kind of biting the bullet and swallowing our pride and being like, hey, let's work together. Let's find a solution moving forward into the future. So that way we can overcome some of these challenges and let's learn how to be a team. Just some notes, obviously Uranus is the modern day ruler of Aquarius, and Uranus is direct. It's in Taurus at 19 degrees. So we talked a little bit about how as, Mercury and all of these planets are kind of going through Aquarius, it's reverberating, not just because of the aspect of the square that we'll see, but it's reverberating from Uranus. So a lot of these movements that we're seeing are connected to radical changes and transformations with farmers, Taurus, banking, Taurus, food, Taurus, values, Taurus. And so we're seeing people coming together and talking about these topics and discussing these things. I think we're going to see a lot of really interesting things where there's going to be more discussion about, funding, especially with unions. I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about how, people are playing a role in their city council meetings and things like that, and how money is being spent. And I also have this sneaky suspicion that this is going to be about how we're starting to learn more about the effects and the implementation, of technology in the banking system. And I've talked to you guys about this for months. I talked to you guys about this, new payment system that we saw that has kind of been rolled through in the United States, the Fed Now, and how I think that was kind of like a Trojan horse in the beginning process of kind of getting people used to having these direct payments, and that it's kind of going through the government. But I think we're going to be hearing more about tech and how tech and, blockchain technology and other things are potentially going to be built into future money and transactions, certainly surveillance with Mercury, Pluto, and also analytics and, seeing what you're spending it on, where is it going, where is your money coming from? And I'll just leave it at that. But for me, that's concerning. And that's been a real reason why I've always really felt like cash is king. And I come from a background where, a long time ago when I was a struggling college student, was in the service industry for a very long time. And, I always have, tried and wanted to kind of tip people in cash. I've always been somebody who's always wanted to keep cash on hand. I think that's important in case of emergencies. But I look at this and I go man, I have some concerns with just how much of a merger big tech and, government are going to be having when it comes to the banking system, and not being able to have freedom of, transactions. And just people having insight into how we're spending money, little concerning for me personally. I think about Saturn being the dispositor as well, the traditional dispositor. So we got to look at Saturn. And this is kind of bringing me back to that pin that I made about Aquarius having connections to airports. Okay, so, recently there's a lot of stuff on social media that's been very fascinating about everyday citizens that are just walking into airports, and they have cell phones, and they're, walking through an airport in Atlanta. They're walking through an airport in Chicago. They're walking through an airport in Texas. This is happening all over the place. And they're seeing that there is just rooms filled with illegal migrants that are just there, that are being kind of watched and being kept. So I connect this actually to Saturn. So Saturn in Pisces is about the illusion of control. It's about hidden things, hidden rooms, hidden places, and things that are being managed or controlled by government. Now, hospitals, prisons, mental institutions, yes, all of those systems are also ridiculously corrupt. We don't even need to get into that. But I think about how there's been so many eyes on the southern border over the last few weeks, and everybody's talking about the wall and what's going on with Abbott and what they're doing. And it's great that they're bringing attention to it. But it got me thinking when I was thinking about Aquarius and airports, I was like, this is going to be more about not just how people are coming in through the southern border, but how people are actually coming in through airports, I hear reports every day on X about how people are like, yeah, you know, we're seeing, you know, basically planes that are landing later at night, people being put into buses and being sent places. I don't think we're talking enough about that. I don't think we know enough about that. I don't think there's enough information about where they're coming from, who's funding it, why we're seeing parts of major international airports being shut down because there's huge rooms of people who are just being kept there. That's a question we should all be asking. Who's organizing this? Why are they there? I also was thinking about like boats and coastal cities and coastlines. I mean, I've seen a couple crazy videos where you see people who are just like flying up on like these like big rafts and everybody jumps off, and literally in like Southern California. We're seeing this in like places near San Diego, places near, you know, coastal connections to Mexico, where just get off a raft and they're just taking off and they're running into the street. So this is, I think, going to be something beyond border walls. I mean, yes, they're going to talk more about immigration. You're going to see a lot of people coming up and talking about it because Saturn is in the sign that deals with people who are seeking asylum, or, you know, people who are lost or who don't have a home. That's all Pisces. But I think that's important. I mean, I think that that's something to take into consideration. I also think about how people are going to be talking about and, you know, discussing more this lack of leadership and, you know, where are the leaders when we need them and what's going on behind the scenes. I think that's equally important. And then obviously the squares to Uranus are very significant. This is going to be a time period where you're going to notice that things are going to be quite wacky. The news might be particularly like nuts. We're hearing some things that sound very crazy, and it's going to bring up some stuff where people are going to have a really hard time adjusting, accepting, or adapting to something. That's when we're going to see some electronic breakdown, or we're going to hear stuff about power surges, things frying, stuff of that nature. Energy levels also potentially, you know, going up, and then we're going to see that it's going to create some kind of rise in cost of utilities or potentially even resources. And then watch for that mid Aquarius, mid-February Aquarius stellium. That's something I keep referencing, but it's a very, very, very powerful time for all of us collectively. So if you're watching this on the 6th, surprise, Mercury has already been in Aquarius for 2 days. The last 2 days have been particularly interesting with Mercury's ingress and also the conjunction to Pluto. So actually the last 2 days we have seen Mercury in conjunction with Pluto, and that has been the first planet that Mercury has met during its ingress into Aquarius. So it is immediately met with deep, powerful, thought-provoking, potentially fringy, out of the box, out there ideas, right? So that was the first conjunction. Then we see Mercury that's going to continue to keep moving through the sign of Aquarius. And on the 10th, we will see not only a new moon in Aquarius, okay, but we will see Mercury in Aquarius square Jupiter, okay? Mercury square Jupiter at an 8. So if Mercury is communication and ideas and things that we're reading on the internet, stuff that we're hearing and all that stuff, what collective kind of chatter is all about, the square to Jupiter makes it bigger. It's going to enhance that. Now that can lead to tall tales, fabrications, you know, obviously dishonesty, hidden secrets, lies. Sure, we can see that. Generally, you know, Jupiter is a planet that is about the moral kind of high road and like doing the right thing. So Mercury square Jupiter, we can see a lot of people who are talking about, you know, like it's the right thing to invest your money into this. It's the right thing to, you know, make this sacrifice maybe because it's an Aquarius, or, you know, it's for the best. Watch, I think, also for just like philosophical debates. There can be some religious debates that are going on. You know, these are in financial signs where Taurus represents the money or the things that we possess. The 11th house is about the collective. I mean, I think about just this last week, I mean, this, you know, proposed bill that they're trying to kind of pass through Congress, where they're saying, well, we have to figure out something. We got to help somehow, you know, this migrant situation in some of these, you know, these cities, these major cities, which were considered, you know, cities that were supposed to be protecting, very liberal, very democratic cities, protecting immigration. And now we're hearing crime getting overrun. We're hearing about, people who are having to send their kids home because their gymnasiums are being taken over by migrants. We're hearing things like, it's just crazy. It's never ending, right? And now we're starting to see it creep into places like Denver, Chicago, New York, other cities. I mean, I'm hearing about it in like Austin, so it's all over the place. I do feel like, the Mercury square Jupiter is still going to be reverberating off of Saturn because Jupiter's traditional association is Pisces. So it's going to be like, well, how much is too much? How much is it going to cost us to fix this? Okay, so they're going back and forth about this proposed bill in Congress that they want to, basically come up with all of this money so we can start giving prepaid Visa cards to migrants, making it possible for them to have food, all these new programs and stuff to be able to kind of fund this. This is going to come from our tax dollars. This is going to, continue to come out of our pockets to be able to pay for this. We're paying taxes to live here, to send our kids to school, to be able to have clean streets and safe communities. And now it's going to be going to bringing in this flood of supporting these people who have come here, which we didn't ask for. It's been thrust upon us. And now we have to find a way to be able to fund it. Well, if you look into the bill, you look a little bit deeper. Some of the stuff that's in there is like, billions of dollars to Ukraine, billions of dollars to Israel, billions of dollars that's also potentially going to go to extra aid if Ukraine needs it. And there's also talk about other legislation that's potentially going to be passed that is going to landlock and put things basically in a situation where even if there is a new president that comes in that is a Republican president, it would limit that incoming president from being able to undo any of the immigration policies that are being put in place now. So I kind of see that as like a Hail Mary. That's like, if this current administration does not continue into the next presidency, then it's like, okay, we're going to make it almost impossible to undo this and to close the border down or to deport people and send people back. You kind of have to ask yourself, like, why is that happening? And like, why are we still funding these wars? Well, Mercury square Jupiter is going to be this big news about how much money potentially is going back and forth somewhere, or some big dropping or damning information potentially. Right now tensions are really high. There's a lot of stress obviously going on with multiple places around the world, but in particular, just being an American, hearing about some of the unrest that's going on in the Middle East right now is concerning, especially in the midst of what has been, some of these, drone attacks, I guess. And I kind of have some concerns about this kind of continuing. 8s in astrology always deal with death, some kind of, scandal, some kind of exposure, something that's being found or found out. It has this like Scorpio energy. And I don't talk about this a lot, but 8 degrees of Taurus in particular, that's a degree that's associated with black magic, right? So it's like no coincidence that this square is happening right around the time that people are watching the Super Bowl. All of the money that's being put into the ads and the advertising. Jupiter, Mercury. How much money is being spent on these ads? How much people are seeing it? Jupiter in Taurus, it does create this overabundance, but that 8 degrees has strong associations, like I said, with black magic, ceremonial stuff, things that are kind of like brainwashing, stuff that will it can literally have an ill effect on people. So I was looking at the astrology being like, wow, Sun square Uranus and Mercury square Jupiter, it's like planting a seed basically for 6 months from this new moon about how much negative, information can impact us, Mercury, Pluto, how much brainwashing is going on and like, convincing people to buy things, to consume things, to eat more of this, to spend more on that, to take certain medications. And I'm personally not a fan. So I'm a diehard football fan, man. I love watching football. My family comes from the Midwest. I've been a Packer fan my whole life, kind of tumultuous. My husband's a Bears fan. But I kind of look at this and I was just kind of like, I'm over it. Like, I don't even care about talking about the Hollywood gossip side of what's going on with the Super Bowl and the 2 teams. I'm like, well, I'm not going to subscribe to that because I feel like it's like energy harvesting. And I know that might sound crazy, but I'm not a fan. So I'm going to be watching that Mercury-Jupiter square. I think that there can be some subliminal messaging going on that's encouraging people to participate in things that are not savory and also not positive. Obviously, this is a day that you want to be mindful when it comes to spending money, signing contracts, talking to somebody about something, what information you receive. I would be weary of what comes out of it, personally. Then on the 15th, we're going to see Mercury trine the South Node in Libra, and it'll also sextile the North Node. So in my opinion, one of like the better transits yet. Granted, we're going to get hit with like a moon square Mercury. So we are going to feel like, okay, there is some kind of challenge in being able to make the physical changes and adapt, but stay with me. This will be coming into the first quarter square since the new moon as well. So this is going to be kind of really trying to get us on track with making some of those changes that, we set, basically those intentions that we set during the new moon in Aquarius. But this is the first like decent aspect that we see with Mercury. So it's going to take us until the 15th. Now, Mercury will trine the South Node in Libra. So we have something about like collective communication, ideas, the future, and releasing or setting ourselves free of old relationship karma, of feeling reliant on other people, of feeling as if we have to be in a relationship to feel loved, that we have to have romantic love to be wanted. That we have to be with somebody else to be considered like valuable, that we always have to lean on that ex that we call on, or we always have to rely on having like a support system that's romantic, right? So with Mercury and Aquarius, it's like, no, we have friends that we can lean on. There's more forms of love than romantic love. There is platonic love. There's the love for best friends in our community and connection. And where maybe we've had a tendency to talk to the same person over and over and not get any results, or we, maybe keep going to that same therapist and we're like, I'm just not connecting, whatever. There is like something that's going to change with the mind where we're going to be like, you know what, I don't have to continue to align myself with that person or that relationship. I need to be thinking about future solutions, and maybe it's not working with someone one-on-one, maybe it's joining a group. I've seen a lot of people who have been opting out of like working one-on-one with a therapist in a traditional setting, and they've been doing like telehealth sessions. That could be very Mercury, trine the South Node. I've seen a lot of people who have also really benefited from, working collectively with groups online, and whether that's like self-help, healing, wellness, astrology. These are all like kind of like Aquarius themes. So I like that the mind can kind of, detach from the idea of like having to be partnered. And of course it happens right around Valentine's Day, right? And then we also have Mercury that is sextiling the North Node and Chiron. So the sextile is like it's a friendly aspect. It's a Venusian aspect. So if you're doing the work here in Aquarius, you're able to reap the benefits here in Aries. And when Mercury sextiles Chiron in Aquarius, it's like, yeah, we can come together as a group and discuss some of our own personal like wounding, and like we get that support. Like I look at this and I'm like, what a great day to go to like an AA meeting, or to go to like a meeting that's about, getting support from others. Maybe it's going to be about how we can better support other people. Maybe this is a time where we find like the perfect kind of like meetup group online, like something like that's going to come from this. We have to align ourselves with other people to reap the benefits of that personal healing. And so I like the sextile, especially because the North Node is our destiny, our dharma. And Mars is now in Aquarius at this point. We'll have just come into conjunction with Pluto. So definitely the action is going to be about, coming together as a group and unifying to be able to kind of heal this wound of feeling like separate or isolated. I like that a lot. Okay, so we'll leave it at that. So the other aspect is going to be on the 16th. And on the 16th, we are going to see Mercury square Uranus in Taurus. Looks like that's going to happen around the time that the moon is there as well. The square will actually be at 19 degrees, which is a relationship degree. So we've got Uranus down here at 19. We've got Mercury up here at 19. And this is interesting because 19 deals with committed relationships, partner, spouses, together with another person, and Mercury will square Uranus. Okay, so squares are the energy of Mars. It kind of forces two sides to reconcile. This could literally manifest as having like a dispute among a group of friends about a financial matter. Everybody goes out to dinner. Everybody wants to split the check, and some people are angry that one person ordered like 8 Mai Tais, right? Or whatever, and you didn't drink, but you're like, why am I getting stuck with the bill? That is literally the squares between Aquarius and Taurus. It can also be about where there is some updates or some changes or some shifts going on with social media or something involving electricity or technology and the impact that it has on our resources. It's going to be like people realizing like, wait a second, like what new like extra fees are being tacked onto my internet bill, or like there's a new service fee or like a carbon tax for like my energy bill, like what's going on? These kinds of things can happen. I do anticipate we're going to hear more about where some social networks might be growing and there may be such a focus and an emphasis and being like, hey, you know, in order to keep this rolling, like we have to charge subscriptions, or like people need to pay for services now. And I think you're definitely going to see that with things that are going to be, like subscription-based stuff. Now, obviously, there's like a massive stellium of planets in Aquarius. So having like Venus conjunct Pluto this day, you know, Mercury square Uranus, and Uranus is in a Venus sign. Certainly like the 14th, 15th, 16th is pretty wild for relationships. And I don't think it's just going to be romantic. I think it's going to be about the relationships that we have with our goals, with the future, with our dreams, and like where we actually actively have to come together and work together to make this physically come into reality. I think this might be a day where we see some pretty dramatic stock market swings. I think this is a day where we're going to see some pretty dramatic stuff also with like the banking market, and something about resources. And, you know, this is where there could potentially be some major decisions being made by Congress or some legislation that's going down that could have some real significant effects on money. I'm curious to see how this manifests with all of these, because it's just so many planets. Like, you know, Mars is still conjunct Pluto. We're also seeing that Mars is starting to come into a square with Jupiter. So we're going to see some similar themes where all planets have to meet Pluto. They must change and transform. They deal with the crisis. Then it squares Jupiter. It makes us feel all of these things much more magnified. And then the squares to Uranus is like, kind of get with the program, right? So you're going to see a lot of repetition this month in some of these transits. Obviously, you know, if you happen to be somebody who has any personal planets around 18, 19, 20 degrees of the fixed sign, so Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, you're really feeling these squares big time. So it's like really important to know where this is taking place in your chart. So I'm going to tell everybody, go and listen to your February horoscopes. I go in depth and talk about the stellium and like how it's kind of building and what to expect from some of the squares. Eventually, I think, you know, once we get to Mercury changing signs, this isn't going to be until the 23rd. So we actually won't see the Mercury Cazimi until Pisces season. But Mercury will stay in this particular sign. Come on, there we go. Okay, until the 23rd. So no other real aspects between now and then. On the 23rd, we're going to have Mercury go into Pisces. You'll see that Cazimi eventually in Pisces season with Sun and Saturn right after the full moon in Virgo. And that's a whole other video, but I have a lot to say about that. My advice is, you know, make note of these dates. I'll put these dates in the description so you can save them and you can take a look at them if you're questioning when these things are happening. Like I said, go and listen to your horoscopes. I encourage all of you guys to be trying to connect and communicate with other people. Try to go out and make new friends, hear other people's perspectives and point of views. Keep an open mind, because like I said, the truth could be much stranger than fiction. If you guys like my content, make sure you give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment below. I would love to hear from you, especially if you have Pluto transiting your Mercury. Maybe if you were born with some of these aspects, like Mercury square Uranus, Mercury square Jupiter. If you have Mercury in Aquarius, I'd love to hear from you. Leave me your comments below. All of your guys' interactions and thumbs up really helps the channel grow. And I love hearing your guys' kind of feedback about what's happening in the world. Certainly, like I said, there's going to be some really big stories that are going to be breaking. So we're going to have plenty of stuff to talk about, but you guys can always come back here and leave me your comments and let me know what you think about these particular transits. Like I said, as I'm filming this, you know, these things are already kind of breaking. You know, this morning we heard about, unfortunately, you know, the King of England, King Charles, he is apparently undergoing some kind of cancer treatment. They said that he's been diagnosed with cancer. No coincidence that it's like the same day that they're rolling out cancer vaccines in the UK, but okay. We also hear reports that Tucker Carlson is finished having apparently an interview with Vladimir Putin in Russia. These are all like Mercury, Pluto things, you know? So I think there's going to be some more of this stuff that's going to be breaking over the next couple days. But if I missed any major headlines, leave them for me below. I'd love to hear from you guys. And I will catch you all back here on Thursday. Until next time, take care.